Welcome to Resiliency The Podcast. My friends, if you, like me, love musical theater, then today's guest is for you. She is a singer, a musical director, and a master teaching artist with more than 30 years of experience. Some highlights: she was a master teaching artist at Disneyland for Disney Performing Arts. She's also been the lead master teaching artist for Disney musicals in schools, and that's done via Sagerstrom Center for the Arts in Orange County, as well as Center Theater Group in Los Angeles. She's also been a vocal coach for some of your favorite episodic television, for example, on the set of NBC Studios' Parks and Rec, and she's been a voiceover artist for PBS Television's Art to Art series. And guys, the list goes on and on. And again, for those of you passionate about theater, your heart is going to skip a beat when I tell you that she has shared the stage with some of the biggest names that we know and love, like Brian Stokes Mitchell, Stephanie J. Block, Hugh Panaro, Shirley Jones, and the great Laura Bell Bundy. I'm just personally so excited. And I have saved the best for last. Today's guest was honored at the beginning of this year at the Tony Awards as part of the Excellence in Theater Education Award Initiative. And this recognizes her as an exceptional drama teacher and director, particularly with her work with students with disabilities. And I want to make it personal here for just a moment. Myself and my husband, Asif, who's the executive producer of the show, we had the opportunity to see one of Cynthia's shows. And the resilience and strength that you could see and feel from these children who were able to express themselves, it was absolutely priceless. And I am so excited that we have her here today to share this with you firsthand, the beauty of the resilience that comes through this woman's creative artistry. With that, I hope you will give a warm welcome with me to Miss Cynthia McGonagle McGarity.
Oh my goodness, how am I ever going to live up to that? That was an incredible introduction. Thank you.
Well, luckily it's like your life.
This is just what I do, you know? But thank you. That was lovely. Wow.
Well,
thank you for having me today.
We're really, really, really thrilled to have you here. And it sounds like, as Jen was talking about Studio D, there's lots of magic going on. And we want to hear all about that. But one of the things that we start with to kind of frame this conversation is about resilience. What does resiliency mean to you?
Okay, the question is, can I get deep at the beginning, right?
Please.
Why not? Go ahead.
Because I've really been thinking about this a lot ever since my first conversation with you all at the end of my show. And I feel like for me, in the past, the word resilience has had a charge to it that I haven't always loved. And I think it's that I'm older, so that feeling of, you know, pick yourself up, brush yourself off, start all over again kind of thing. And as I've really started to unpack this in preparation for speaking with you today, I realized that what that type of philosophy is missing from the importance of the word resilience is wisdom. And so for me, thank you, by the way, for having me, because this has been an important shift for me in the way I think about the word resilience. And it's that, you know, anyone can run at a wall with the helmet on 100 times and keep running at the wall and it never like breaks down, right? But when you add wisdom to the resilience factor, you start asking questions like, what if I ran at the wall this way? Or what if I tried to climb over the wall? Or what if I went around the wall and I never ever had to hit my head again, right? And so for me, I think the word resilience now has a positive charge, yay, thanks to you, because I'm really realizing that when we share lessons learned and we continue on with not just continuing on, but with prudence and with wisdom and with questions that are important in helping others even, then I feel like that's really resilience, and that's resilience at its most beautiful. That was a long answer.
It was a beautiful answer, Cynthia. I love that you went deep, and I love that you gave us an extra layer, because we do hear a lot. Get back on the horse, jump back up. The idea of what you're talking about, the lens that I see it through, and I'll take it over, jump to a business perspective. There's a business concept of continuous improvement. And what you're talking about when you talk about running at that wall and then saying, wait a minute, I don't want to do it the exact same way every time. I want to continuously improve. And I think it is a combination of that grit to keep running at the wall, and then at the same time, that an intellect to make those changes. And I will connect that to theater to say that I think when working in theater, it requires a really strong balance of both that grit. Hey, I'm going to do this dance and I'm going to do it 7 times a week, full out and kick my face, but also wisdom. How can I care for my instrument? How can I care for myself? So I think that's amazing. I want to throw to Dr. Kelly for a minute as our in-house PhD and Doctor of Strategic Resilience, and wonder if you have any comments on Cynthia's exceptional definition.
Well, it's a fabulous definition, and what it speaks to, and I think some of the creativity from your theater life comes into this, because what I'm hearing you say is you've moved from resilience being grit, determination, bounce back, recover. That's one aspect of resilience, but resilience is multifaceted and it's dynamic. What you've shared with us is you've moved the spectrum to the other side, where now you're confident to say, I wonder what would happen if. You don't have the answer either. That's resilience. That's about transformation. That's about living in a state of tenacious transition. And that's what I'm hearing you doing right now. And it's just beautiful.
And I'm going to just say, because we're not going to cut out what Kelly just said, and that grandfather clock behind her, for all of our listeners, I hope it puts you at ease. It's a beautiful thing to listen to. Cynthia, any thoughts on what Dr. Kelly just said?
Well, I kind of want to cry, and I'd like to just sit here in a room with y'all now for 10 hours and just talk about this word, because what did you say? Tenacious transformation? Oh my goodness, that I'm writing down. I feel like, I've done, as many people have, I've done years and years of therapy and emotional therapy. And I think that's probably where my original negative charge came from, not from therapy, but bringing these notions into therapy of, well, just get up. Well, just, put on a happy face and go. But really, the wise part of us says, today I can take baby steps. Today I can get up and get a shower. Today, if we're having a really hard time, right? Rather than ignoring possibly the reasons that got us into the downward mind frame, So I do think 100% mindset is huge. I use it often in my work and in my personal life, but I think now there's this added layer of asking myself informed questions and also giving myself grace on the days when I'm like, you know what, today I can't do this, and that's okay. Or how does this feel in my body? Oh, this makes me feel really anxious. I'm going to put this on pause for a minute and then come back to it and see how I get into it after asking some informed questions. So I love what Dr. Kelly said. I am taking copious notes. I hope that's okay. Because some of this is like, I think so many of us say, I don't need to change. I'm resilient. But to me, that isn't what resilience is. Resilience is also curiosity. Resilience is also facing the hard stuff and saying, okay, this is hard for me to look at, but what have I been doing up till now that is keeping me in like an unhealthy pattern, for example, or things like that. I'm getting really deep right off. I hope this is okay, but it's an important word to have the healthiest framework possible, because people, I feel, are at their best when they're curious. They're at their best when they're asking informed questions of themselves and others. So,
Cynthia, Sorry to our executive producer. We're going to sit on question one for a long time because this is the most important. Like, really, this is why we started this, because as Dr. Kelly tells us, there are so many definitions of resilience, and to be resilient is to make it through in so many ways. I want to speak for a minute, and I'll bring in some personal thoughts here, to the negative charge. And I love that you said you've been in therapy a long time. I have as well. I'm a very big proponent of therapy. I think you have to check yourself and work with yourself and build that ability to honor the body. What I can say, and especially to maybe some of our younger listeners who may be out there in the theater world, there's a lot of pressure in any professional environment, but certainly in the theater world, because your body is your product. And I can speak to you talked about the tenacious transition. Was that the word? The tenacious transition that you went through. And I can tell you that when I was young, the way that I motivated myself to be resilient. So let's say, for example, to keep myself in shape so that I could dance and be on stage. There was always negative reinforcement. So I would lie in the bed. I didn't want to get up. And my inner voice would say, "You're fat. You look fat on stage. You have to get up because you're fat." Well, of course, that is negative. That brings a negative charge. And when you do that to yourself for years and years and years, you build a resentment within yourself. You're angry at that voice inside of yourself. So I love that what you brought into this layer is that by doing the work, by going and asking yourself and building that self-curiosity and building a way to honor the body, you actually can free your talent and can open up new opportunities and new doors, because it's not the anxiety-ridden young performer who's going to run in and be able to command that stage. It's the person who has achieved peace with themselves. That is a beautiful sense of resilience.
My inclusive applause. So you can't really see my hands, right? But no, I think you are really hitting on part of where I was coming from. So yes to all of that. And the other thing about being in theater is, in order to be impactful, you have to dive deep into your character work, right? I am of the school of, what is your personal subtext as it relates to this character? And I have been trained to go into my personal stories to feel the connection, right, with the characters. Happy, sad, clown-like, comedic, heartbroken, whatever, right? But when you're getting into that sort of heartbreak of a character, to have someone asking you, well, what is it you're feeling? What, can't you just get there? You know, that kind of thing. I think you just have to, you have to have such a self-awareness and an ability to not be judging yourself, because it's already so hard thinking others might be judging you and your interpretation. And so in order to dive deep and show up as your most vulnerable self, you have to love yourself. You know, you have to even love the horrible experiences, because that's what's informing your interpretation of the character, and that's what moves people. Right? I always say to my students, I am of the camp that I would much rather hear a really good singer with a phenomenal story than a perfect singer without a story. Right? Because otherwise I'm not impacted. I might be impacted at the beauty of the sound, but my heart isn't getting touched. And to me, that's why we go to theater.
Amen. I hear in what you're saying, Cynthia, the word authenticity comes to mind. And I would pair that with what you're talking about, which is self-love. When you love yourself, you can be authentic. And it's so interesting, because it turns out that the key to playing another character is to know yourself. And then I want to relate this just for a moment, because not everyone is a theater nerd like I. So I want to relate it to anybody who may not be in theater. But I'm going to tell you, this is the same for every young professional. I remember getting my big job, and I saw that you were supposed to wear jackets. And so I was in an ill-fitted jacket, and I'm sitting in and I'm trying to do what I think they want me to do. That never made me my best professional. It wasn't until you can really love yourself and open those doors that I could bring true resilience to my business world and then to the onstage world. Cynthia, I think it's beautiful. Dr. Kelly, I'm going to throw to you for a minute, and then I promise we're getting to the questions. But boy, this discussion is so valuable. It must be said.
Well, it is a fantastically valuable session. And I think because there's so much wisdom and so much learning that we're hearing, right now, which is really fantastic. And I like what you said, Jen, about you don't have to be in theater. You don't have to be in entertainment. I think of some of the work that I do around the world, and you have to understand who you are and what you bring to the discussion in a way that is respectful of other people's backgrounds, their cultures, their identity, their diversity, so that you can work with them for change. And where I'm going with this long-winded story is each of us has something or multiple things we have had to track through. You can't tack around. Jen and I talk about this frequently. You can't tack around the challenge or the frustration or the heartbreak or the heartache or the anxiety or anything like that. Because if you don't learn from that, you'll never be the person you're meant to be to fulfill the purpose you're supposed to have here. That's what you bring to this discussion, Cynthia.
Oh boy, y'all are deep. What that makes me think of is even coming into a situation like this, where I feel like I don't really think I'm qualified to be here. I still think that, right? But then I think, but some of the things that I'm doing, other people, and now I'm really specifically talking about my work with the disabled community. Not everyone gets the opportunity to do that. Not everyone has, whatever, the interest or the skill set or, whatever it is. But then when I thought about that part of this bigger discussion about resilience, I'm like, okay, I think I might be okay to come on and have something to say, right? And so what you were just saying, Dr. Culver, is makes me think of the times that my inner voice, that was what you're talking about earlier, Jen, right? Saying, you don't know enough. That's that coming out. And I have to say, hang on a second. I think there's an important conversation to be had here. And it's not going to happen if I don't show up. And so thank you again. I'll probably keep saying it because I'm from Alabama and I'm Southern and I always say thank you, but thank you again for the opportunity. This is something that I'll be really transparent and say, I don't feel entirely comfortable. Like, I'm great one-on-one. I'm great in a classroom in front of people, but when there's like a stake, when there's a stake in what I'm saying, then sometimes I get a little like, what am I going to say? And can they edit it out? I'm not sure. But thank you for the invitation, because then I can show up and not just say something to other people, but to myself. That was an important conversation, and I think that that's something that that's my lifelong work, self-work. Keep showing up, because once you're there, you have something to say and something to give, as everyone does. It's when people don't feel seen or heard that they feel they don't have things to share. And that's what I love about working with any of my students across the board. I want to see them. I want to listen. I want them to feel known, and I want them to feel safe. And I think for me, that so much more than ever being on a stage or performing with this person or that person or whatever, to me, that is my life's work, is allowing students to feel seen and heard and known.
Cynthia, I want to say first, thank you for that vulnerability. I think it's so important for people to understand it takes a lot of bravery to step up and tell your story in a public forum, or really to anyone, to open your heart and go to this place. But then the other thing I keep seeing in what we're discussing is finding meaning. And, a lot of people in your position, a lot of theater people would say, I find meaning in the celebrities I've shared the stage with. I've sung with Brian Stokes Mitchell. I mean, that's the accomplishment. But resilience is in finding the deeper meaning, the soul meaning. And you have found that specifically with this work with disabled children, as you just spoke about. And so I do want to turn the conversation for this really incredible honor. I want to just say, the Tony Awards. This is just, it's huge. And for you to have found the meaning you're talking about, you've moved through a performance career, through a teaching career, and you found this. I want to know, when you received that nomination, when you went to those Tonys, what did it mean to you personally and professionally as it relates to this journey of resilience?
I was nominated for this award for my work at Studio D. There were thousands of nominations. And what I found out later was there were 3 rounds of vetting of these thousands of recipients. And it was done by the Tony Awards, Carnegie Mellon University, and Broadway's Theater League. And so what ended up happening was there was an overall winner. That person was at the Tonys. But I, in receiving my honorable mention, was featured in the playbill, which is something I've got here. This was my moment, right? And yes, and my name in the playbill itself, and this was the winner. So what I will say is, even though I didn't attend, it's sort of what we're talking about before, right? Even though I wasn't at the award ceremony, the moment for me was actually the one that you saw, Jen, when it was announced at the end of the performance of all of these incredible students that I get to work with that I had been awarded the honorable mention. That was the moment for me because, first of all, I was surprised. And I don't usually get surprised. And that was a big surprise to me. I had known I'd been nominated and I was like, oh, well, great. But then I hadn't heard anything. So I was like, okay, well, that was really an honor to be nominated, right? But then when I heard that I had received the honorable mention out of thousands of applicants, to me, there's so much good work being done all over the country in theater education. And to just know that I earned that spot on a page, but to hear it announced in front of these families who, these are my people, that was the biggest honor. And then I did have a watch party with my son and his partner, so that was fun.
That's right. Celebrate. That's right.
We had a little glass of champagne and had a toast, and that was great.
Yay.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask, sort of stay in this vein. You said, you were with your people when the honorable mention was announced. So let's just stay in that and tell us a bit more about your work with Studio D, and making the arts accessible for students with disabilities. How did that come into your life and what has it taught you?
Yeah. It's a great question. I've worked with Segerstrom Center for the Arts, which is where that's Studio D's home. I've worked with them since 1992. Do you like how I shaded my mouth, but everyone could hear it, right?
Don't worry about it. Age is just a number.
It is.
Amen. Amen.
And actually, at the time, my mentor and voice teacher sort of conceived of this program for students with disabilities. And he just tapped me and said, I think you should be doing this. And I was like, well, I mean, I'm always up for something, So anyway, we did actually bring this to what was at the time Orange County Performing Arts Center. And we had, I think it was maybe 7 or 8 years of summer camps with students with disabilities. 1 week camp, 9 to 2, and had a performance at the end. And then that, I think, for the administration at the time, sort of ran its course. And then I started going out into the school systems and doing 10 to 17 week residencies with students with disabilities, where I would just bring my bag of tricks and we would work on musical theater and theater. And then we would do like a small performance at the end. There's usually a culminating factor for me, although performance is not the goal for me, it's process. But I think it's a great celebration at the end. It's something to cheer about at the end. I learned all of this, in whatever way I could. And so in 2017, the person who had worked with me on those summer camps, his name's Jason Holland, was promoted to a vice president of engagement for the center. And he started working on this idea of having an on-campus school. At the time, it was called the School of Dance and Innovation, I believe is what it was called. And then in the years since I've been involved, it's been renamed to Studio D, Arts for All Abilities. And so they were already up and running for a few seasons. And he called me and he said, do you want to write some musical theater curriculum for us? And I was like, sure, I'll do that. And I was sort of doing other things at the time. I was really busy at Disneyland. But I said, I'll write the curriculum, but I don't really want to teach it. And he was like, okay, well, could you write it and then just teach the pilot so you know what works and what doesn't? And I was like, yeah, I could do that. And, however many years later, what was that, 2017 or 18, something like that. So sucked in.
Too much love.
Yes. Be careful what you say yes to. I'm just kidding. But now it's my main work. I mean, it's my full-time job. And so I wrote musical theater curriculum. I've written theater curriculum now. So we have those classes in addition to the original dance and music classes. And now I'm working on, with our team, another 6 curriculums to start. Everything from Grown Up and Me, like 3 to 4-year-olds, to come in with their families, because a lot of these students don't get exposure to, some of them don't have any other outside school activity or any activity, because some of our students either have like medical conditions that preclude them from exposing themselves to germs and things like that through the school system. So a lot of them are homeschooled, or they just haven't found a fit. So my original inception in that, I feel like, really informed where I am now. And in the meantime, I wrote curriculum for college voice classes and, things like that. So it's a space where I feel comfortable. But man, I can't believe I said I didn't want to teach the classes, because now that's sort of all I want to do, because they are so amazing. And, they all have a story to tell. And in whatever way they can, we have non-speakers and unreliable speakers. We have low vision, low hearing. We have students with cerebral palsy or Down syndrome or chromosomal anomalies. And what's so funny to me is, as like I'm saying that, it feels even wrong to say it, because I never want to label. I don't want to label anyone, because literally every person that I have met through Studio D has something to share, something to give, a story to tell, And so I have to give all the props to my manager, Chloe, and all of the staff at Studio D. Some of my co-teachers, many of whom you saw, Jen, at the performance of Seussical Jr., that they teach me every day, how to be best inclusive. And I think something that we have at Studio D that maybe some other programs who work with students with disabilities don't have is we always have two artists, so two artist teachers in the room and a therapist, always. So we have occupational and physical therapists, and we have speech therapists for, our musical theater classes. And that's something that I think it probably is offered elsewhere. I don't know about it, but I'm sure it's offered elsewhere, but that was the basis. We always have to have supports in place, accessibility in place. So no matter where we're meeting our students, we're meeting them where they are, but they can fully participate.
I think it is so interesting that you fell into your most meaningful work. I really do. And I think that happens to so many of us. So many of us are, actually, I'll just say for a moment that I have a TEDx talk that I gave that the title of it is Confidently Walking in the Wrong Direction. And often you're walking in the direction. Yeah, here we go. I'm not going to teach that class. And then you wake up and you find out this is your life's work. And I also want to comment on, frankly, if I'm just going to get really honest about the labeling and the being careful, because I really feel that. I feel that exactly as you say, and this is something I could feel from the performance we saw of Seussical Jr., that this is something where each individual is looked at as an individual, and each individual is allowed to shine in whatever way they can and allowed to express in whatever way they can. And I have to say, as a communicator, and we had another episode earlier on, a couple of ladies who had started a business called Speech Hens, and it was just focused on helping people to get the verbal communication skills that they need to really succeed in life. And so I'm so inspired by this. I want to ask you, Cynthia, if there is either a story or anything you can share, and again, you don't have to share any names, but just anything you can share that could help the audience. Again, I had the benefit of sitting in there and watching, and I want to tell the audience that what Cynthia is saying, these people, these resources that they have set up, they were all on stage with the kids. And I mean, helping them, pulling around, dancing. It was just so beautiful. Cynthia, can you talk a little bit or tell us a little story that could help the audience to feel this with us about this work you do and the change it makes in these kids' lives?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there are just too many to tell, but I think what I really sort of zero in on, sometimes we don't know what's happening, obviously, outside of class. And after this performance, one of the students' mothers came up to me and she said, I don't know if you know this, but my husband and I they're deeply into musical theater. He's like the dean of theater somewhere. But she said, we were a little resident having our student come into theater. She does a lot of echolalia, which is like just repeating what you say. But she's not the most reliable speaker. And by the way, for people listening, it's a non-speaker, unreliable speaker. The unreliable speaker is what people used to call like selective mutism, where someone might be talking only when they're super comfortable. Otherwise, there's a lot of anxiety, or there might be like an organic thing that's holding the speech back. But anyway, this student is not the most reliable speaker, but she was in theater. And the mother came up to me afterwards and just said, I want to tell everyone about this because since this student has been involved in the theater classes, first of all, she can't wait to come every single time. She's like running down the ramp, trying to get there. But her mother said, I cannot believe the increase in her speech, how many more things she's articulating. And she was really talking about, everyone needs to know this, right? So I've said to my greater administration, we need to start collecting some data because I think it is really challenging to understand until you see it, but that we know what art of any kind does for the individual. And I'm not just talking about young people, but I'm talking about any any student, any just participant of any kind, we know what it does, but to watch it in action and then take like measurements of what it's changing is so phenomenal. So that's not a super heartwarming story. I think it's, I mean, I think what I'm saying is I used to like to share stories about my students, and then I started thinking, I also never want to, what's the word I'm looking, I don't want to violate privacy or make them into a sob story just for the sake of, you know what I mean? I know that's not why you were asking that, but I really do feel that sometimes I feel protective of, hey, this kid's just like any other, and I could do that too for my neurotypical kids, my neurotypical students. When you see something come in and you're like, oh my gosh, can you believe that student just did that? So amazing, right? But for me, this is a question about, whoa, that it's improving speech, that it's improving how a student is ambulatory, how a student builds community, how a student feels accepted. Those are, that's what I feel like just the whole program is doing.
I want to comment and say, first of all, I completely understand what you're saying, and I think it has everything to do with the intention of sharing those stories. I see what you mean, which is to say if someone were looking to self-promote and that's all they wanted to do, then they could use that. Exactly. And Cynthia's given me a finger on the nose to say, right on the nose. And I think it's very clear that that's not what's happening here. But I want to speak to something that I'm going to tie back to the beginning of the conversation, which is we talked about in the beginning, you talked about going through years of therapy. Like I said, I have too. Lots of adults do. We all go through this therapy, and we learn how to love ourselves. And what you're doing, and it's evidenced by the fact that someone who may have selective mutism is speaking more, is you are giving them a forum. A lot of kids, they aren't going to go to therapy the same way an adult will. They may have their therapies to help them through, but it's not precisely the same because they are still growing and learning. Their brains are still forming. And so by offering this offering through Studio D, and by doing it with all the resources you discussed, by doing it at the highest level, what you've done for that child and for many others is you've helped save that child, because you've helped to give them a power to express themselves. And they don't have to speak on a national stage. That's not what they need, but they can speak to their mama. And I have sat with many a mama who has cried and cried over their child. And it's not just because the child perhaps can't speak or has something, but it's because they can feel that the child has something to say and they aren't able to. So I want to comment that the work you're doing and the stories that you're sharing, and they're life-changing. And I also want to say that once you guys do collect that data, we would love to have you back and have another episode and chat a little bit about that. Now, with that, I want to throw to Dr. Kelly and see what might be on her mind here, because we've talked about so many exciting things. But this is just so deep and so really, really powerful, Cynthia. I want to just thank you. Dr. K, what you got?
Well, I like the idea of coming back, because I know, you mentioned you don't really want to tell stories about the kids because you're concerned that it's commercializing them. I think that's the word that you were looking for. And it isn't about commercializing them. It's, if you don't tell these stories, then you can't share the impact. And if you don't share the impact, then you can't change other people's lives, or you can't have a broader community involved in the work that it is that you're doing. And that's why when you have the data, it's important for us to circle back and talk to you again, because then there's a broader impact. And my goodness, if it's working where you are, think about the multiplier effect that you could have, ripples around the United States or North America or the world. So that's what's really, really important about data. I'm not a scientist. I might have a doctor in front of my name, but I do know numbers matter. data matters. Numbers beat no numbers. A really good friend of mine says that to me all the time. Kelly,
I
take your
love that
words
so
and
much.
convert them into numbers, because numbers beat no numbers. So I agree with Jen, and I do really believe that there's a bigger, broader message here. And we talk about community a lot on Resilience the podcast, and I think that you're building a really interesting community, and we can help amplify that voice.
I mean, I think especially for people who don't have a built-in community, right? When you have school friends, that's your community. Or when you're on a soccer team, that's your, you know what I mean? So some of our students, this has become their community. I love that. I had to write that down too. Numbers beat no numbers. I just got back from New York last week, and I was able to go to Lincoln Center Summer Forum. They were celebrating 50 years of teaching artistry. And we got to take workshops from so many fantastic people. But one of the final workshops was about social prescribing, which I'm embarrassed to say I had never heard of before. But it's when physicians are actually prescribing working with artists as part of a holistic therapy. And so I wish I had written the numbers down, and I might have, but my notes are cray right now. But one of the studies that they cited was a group of women with postpartum depression, which I had after my second child. And part of what their physicians prescribed was joining a choir. And this choir was formed just for these women who were just really struggling. And I'm probably going to butcher the statistics, but after, a certain amount of weeks, and some of them were also prescribed medications. So, I mean, I think this is always in tandem with sometimes prescriptions for other things. But in comparing the rate of postpartum depression, ease of symptoms, getting over it more quickly, it was some ridiculous number, like 80 to 85% faster with this social prescribing. And so I really took that to heart. And I've just been thinking a lot about that in what ways can I volunteer or help in that, greater idea, because it's now really starting to come to Los Angeles. It's getting much bigger in New York, but all of this happened in Scotland. And so how did I get on this tangent? I'm not sure, but it was something. We were talking about community, and we were talking about how we're helping. I mean, there are so many ways to do that. And I think about the first teaching artists were really the people who wrote hieroglyphics, because they were telling the stories to the community. But not only were they telling the stories, they were connecting communities, saying, this is what we've done here, right? And so other people could come and see, this is what we do here. But it was community through artistic expression. And I think as an artist, I feel like that's what I've been doing my whole life, and maybe I didn't know it. At one time, I thought I would be the next Barbra Streisand, right? At one time, I thought I would be winning a Tony for Best Actress in a Musical, right? But really, what I think I've been trying to do my entire life is to share stories and create community. And I think that it's such a worthy cause, and it's so needed in our world today in every facet, not just theater.
Cynthia, you've talked quite a bit about teaching and learning, and we heard at the beginning of the podcast a bit of a change that you went from being involved in theater to going to Studio D. So I've got a question. Jen and I have been talking. You've worked on big stages, some of which have really inspired and excited Jen. And now you're in classrooms. Different but the same. How's your definition of success shifted from performer to teacher to director? Tell us a bit about that.
It is a great question. I think, when you're born with a gift, and for me, that was my singing voice, that, I was small and looking at where I could go with this. And I ended up being able to sing and, touring and performing and things like that. And so then the natural inclination was success is going to be when I win a Tony for Best Actress in a Musical, when I record and get a Grammy for Best Pop Artist, which is hilarious because I don't riff well. But what I will say is, I think what changed for me and the definition of success changed for me when I physically lost my voice for a few years. And I had to really shift my priorities because I think I realized at that time, and my voice is back, but it isn't back like it was. It's not, it doesn't at all feel the same to me. But as I started, I was already teaching a lot at the time when I lost my voice, which was probably part of the problem. But I realized success wasn't, it's not in the accolades. Success is in growth. It's in connection. It's in people trusting you with their vulnerability. It's in having little aha moments with students across the board. I guess I would say I feel success like that as a teacher and as a director, but then also it's their success and I'm the vessel. And so for me now, I think when I feel most successful is when I am the most open vessel to channeling my students' desires to communicate and connect. That, to me, that's the big success story to me. I kind of want to cry.
Let's all cry together. Let's all cry together.
I mean, that is just really, really powerful because what you're saying to us is there's a bigger world, this is bigger than me. And I think that's what you're talking about now, your journey that you've had is, a lot of people never reach that level of self-awareness, but it's bigger than me. Jen.
And Kelly, before we get, I know the audience is ready for rapid fire questions, but since we're on the brink of tears, I just have to say this. As I think about it, there's such a connection between the word that comes to mind is pain. So, we all suffer pain in this world. We suffer mental pain. We suffer physical pain. When I think about you losing your voice, that was very painful emotionally, very painful for your career, very painful. I think about some of the kids that I saw on that stage. They probably experienced bodily pain in a way I don't know, And so I wonder if you could leave us with a little of that wisdom, because you yourself have dealt with this pain, you yourself work with pain, and you use the arts to turn that pain into purpose. And that's what I've heard from you today. So I wonder if you'd leave us with a few comments about how others might consider turning their pain into purpose through the arts. And then we will go to Kelly's rapid fire questions.
Okay. I'm going to say it succinctly because I think a lot of it has to do with the things we've discussed, which is, how am I kind to myself? How can I give myself grace? How can I use the lessons I've learned to then inform my art, to inform my purpose? For some people, maybe it isn't art, maybe it's business, or maybe it's athletics, so whatever your personal purpose is. But I know that when I finally came out of the big stupor of losing my voice, and it really was, I will call it a nervous breakdown. Because it changed my identity, or it changed how I saw myself, I think. And when I think about how probably the main way I was finally able to pull myself out of this was because of my community. And so I started leaning into my community and asking for help. That's a hard one when you're Irish and Italian. That
Great, well said.
Yeah, just do it, But I started asking for help. And then I was hearing from my community, I never want to ask for help. And now I feel inspired to ask for help because I know it's okay. And I know I wanted to help you when you asked, right? So I think where I sort of land is, just like you said, Jen, we all experience pain in different ways. I think some of the hardest pain is pain that you can't see, pain that isn't evident to the outside world. But that if you lean on your community and you lean into this thing, like you were saying earlier, Dr. Culver, about your purpose, right? And how you're destined for this. If you just do it, if you just say yes to it, if you just do all of these things, if you can lean into whatever that purpose is and actually share your pain, that's a big one, because we're so used to Instagram stories where someone has had, an illness or a setback, and then all we see is the shiny after, right? I feel a little like a shiny after right now, because in the middle of it was not pretty. So I think if you can share that pain and then lend it to whatever your purpose is supposed to be, your purpose not only becomes deeper and greater, but it impacts more people.
Well said. And
rapid fire?
Well said. Rapid fire, baby.
Okay. All right. If you're ready, what's your favorite movie or TV show that makes you feel resilient?
It's a dark one, but Shawshank Redemption.
Oh my God, we just had that with last guest.
Really?
And it's so true.
Yep.
It's a great one. Talk about resilience. Woo!
Yep. Powerful story. All right, what's your favorite song that makes you feel resilient?
Okay, you're asking this of a musician to say one song, which is just, I think, unreasonable. But so I'm going to give you two. One is A Piece of Sky from the movie Yentl, and one is Defying Gravity from the musical Wicked. That's resilience to me. Yeah.
We go with two, because you know what? When Jen asked me that same question, I couldn't do one. I did. So it's
a hard one, but it's a good question.
Like yin and yang. What's the last thing that made you laugh out loud?
Oh my gosh! Last night Studio D went to Pretend City in Irvine. They have I think it's one night a month neurodivergent night where everything's sensory friendly to students, and we did a dance and music class. And there was a little boy in there that was laughing so hard the entire time. Every time we did any kind of like fun move or anything, he was belly laughing so hard. And then I could almost not teach. I was laughing so hard with him. It was just the best. With endorphins around. It was great.
Oh, laughter's so infectious.
It is. Yep. I can see it. You've created a picture in our mind's eye, which is really lovely. Well, a little more serious. What is a question you'd like to leave for a future guest?
This was also a hard one, but thank you again for letting me be here and really dive deep into this word, because the question I came up with is, where do you find wisdom in your stories of resilience?
Beautiful.
Good question. Oh, that's wonderful. All right, Cynthia. It is a gift. Cynthia, I have one question for you that was left by a past guest. Are you ready?
I am.
All right. So the question is, of all the situations in your life that have required resilience, which one is your favorite?
Okay, that's a tie too, but I'll make them brief. One is the birth of my daughter, because it was a 36-hour labor and my doctor was on another case and I had to just not push for a really long time. And that really, I really felt resilient afterwards.
Yeah.
And my other one is, I am not an athletic person, but I trained for and did a sprint triathlon. And it was years ago, but during that, my son had a diabetes diagnosis and all this stuff happened. So I almost quit, but I thought, no, I have to keep trying this is just for me, and I did it. So those are probably the two.
Cynthia, you are an inspiration. And I love that we're ending it with "This is for me," because what we've talked about here has really touched my heart. And it really helps, I hope, each of our listeners to see and understand how we can bring these things into our heart and find meaning while impacting others and being part of a community. Cynthia, please, if people who are listening would like to follow you, get in touch with you, know more about this incredible work that you do, please share, where can they find you?
I am actually on Instagram at Cynthia McGonagle. I don't do a lot of social anymore. So I think where I would really say is go to the Segerstrom Center for the Arts website and look up like events. It's got all of the Studio D information. And if you ever come to Disneyland with your choir, come take my class. That's that's maybe the other place that you can find me. But yeah,
I want to know if I can sign up, to be honest.
Yeah,
I'm like, well, I'm in.
You too, Doctor. You too, Dr. Culver. Everybody come sing.
Because I need a lot
We would
of help.
love it.
I need a lot of help. And I want to sing in my car really, really well.
Do it.
So
Do it.
Need some help.
I'm excited. Well, and I want to encourage our audience, anyone who's listening, yes, go to that Segerstrom Center for the Arts, look up Studio D, and go see a performance if you can. I promise you, you will leave with a full body, happy feeling, and you will leave knowing that this world can make you resilient. Now, with that, I want to always let our guests know that they can find us online at resiliencythepodcast.com or Resiliency the Podcast on all the socials. And guys, this is the place for stories and strategies and inspiration that helps you to embrace change, overcome challenges, and really succeed in today's ever-evolving world. I want to thank, as always, our beautiful, brilliant, incredible co-host, Dr. Kelly Culver. You can find her online on LinkedIn and on Instagram at Dr. Kelly Culver, or also with her company, theculvergroup.ca. That is .ca for Canada, our friends to the north. Boy, do we love them, and boy, do we love her. And then for me, you can, right back at you, baby. And for me, you can always find me online. That's Jen with 2 N's, JENNQUADER on all the socials, or my company, The Smart Agency. Folks, today has been special. Today we've shed some tears. We've built our hearts even bigger. I feel like mine's already grown three times, as they say. I want to wish you all a beautiful time of resilience, and I want to encourage you. Get out there and express yourself in any way that you see fit. Take a learning from today and know that when you do, it's going to increase your happiness, increase your resilience, and make an impact on others. Thank you, Cynthia. Thank you, guests. Have a beautiful, resilient week. See you next time.